Something has cracked open inside MotoGP tonight. Something bigger than a title fight, bigger than a rivalry, something that reaches straight into the fragile machinery holding the sport together. The leak of Marc Márquez's contract doesn't just expose numbers. It exposes pressure points Ducati never wanted the world to see, revealing clauses written like fear disguised as strategy and bonuses shaped by a factory that gambled on brilliance without preparing for its consequences. Inside those documents lies the truth of a team suddenly dependent on a rider they once treated as a calculated risk, a truth capable of rewiring the power structure of the paddock. Engineers whisper about development secrets tied to his fingerprints, analysts freeze at the financial contradictions, and rivals sharpen their intentions as if sensing blood in a fault line. And Marquez, returning from injury with a fire that refuses to dim, now stands at the center of a storm he never asked for but somehow commands, feeling the weight of a future MotoGP still hasn't realized it owes him. Because this leak doesn't simply reveal a contract, it reveals a fracture that could split the next era of the sport in two. And what comes next may redefine who controls MotoGP, its machines, its money, and its destiny, forever. The paddock froze the moment the leaked contract revealed Marc Márquez's astonishingly modest €3 million base salary, a number so small for an 8-time world champion that it felt like discovering a priceless painting sold for the cost of a framed print. Ducati had engineered a risk-free masterpiece, structuring the deal with towering performance multipliers that exploded only if Marquez returned to his destructive peak. His 11 pre-injury wins activated more than €2 million in bonuses, a detail that exposed how the factory essentially paid only for victories, not promises. Report analysts whispered that Ducati had executed a financial coup, but the documents also revealed how fragile that victory now appeared. Marquez himself reportedly muttered, "I knew I'd earn it on track, not on paper," as if reminding the world that currency bends to speed when speed is real. A small but startling technical note emerged in the leak. Ducati had inserted a telemetry trigger clause tied to lean angle risk thresholds, a rarity in modern contracts. The revelation painted a portrait of a rider who bet on himself harder than any sponsor ever could. They thought it was a bargain, one insider said quietly. Yet the balance of power shifted the moment Marquez delivered beyond projections. The leak made clear that Ducati never expected such an immediate return to generational form. Behind closed doors, some engineers confessed that the bonus algorithms were designed for a gradual resurgence, not a storm. Marquez, reading the numbers, felt a pulse of vindication and whispered internally, "Now they finally see my value." The story spread like fuel vapor through the paddock. His resurgence had outgrown the contract meant to contain it. The metaphors surrounding him turned organic, like a vine breaking the trellis built to shape it. Ducati now faced a superstar who no longer fit the financial cage constructed around him. Every sentence of the leak amplified a truth the factory could no longer avoid. The era in which Ducati controlled the narrative had ended abruptly. The era in which Marquez dictated the terms had just begun. And the leak was the spark that exposed a fire already roaring behind the walls. In that moment, MotoGP understood that the real revolution was not on track but in ink. The contract meant to limit a legend became the document that liberated him, and nothing would contain him again. Ducati's celebrated philosophy of building the best bike so the best riders would inevitably chase it suddenly feels like a relic the moment the leaked terms show how violently the dynamic has shifted. Marquez's decision to abandon Honda and walk away from more than €20 million had once been framed as proof of Ducati's irresistible gravitational pull. Engineers in Borgo Panigale used to joke that the desmesthetici signs riders, not the other way around. Yet the leak exposes a factory now cornered by its own success. His victories turned Ducati's proud strategy into a trap they never anticipated. One senior figure confessed, "We didn't expect the transition to happen this fast." The truth is that Ducati desperately needs him more than he needs their machine. Marquez feels that change in the air and thinks, "I earned this shift." A little-known detail buried in the documents reveals a performance retention clause tied to mid-season development input, showing how central his feedback has become. That clause alone hints at how deeply entangled he is in their competitive identity. Ducati's golden era, once smooth and unstoppable, now trembles under financial and emotional weight. The negotiations have mutated from routine housekeeping to existential strategy. The mood in the factory corridors grows tighter with every whispered update. Observers describe the atmosphere as electric but brittle. Even the bike itself feels like a paradox, a masterpiece creating pressure its creators can barely hold. Marquez's rise has turned the project into a living organism that resists the idea of losing him, like a river refusing to return to its source. Ducati now faces the most high-stakes renewal of the last decade, and everyone knows it. The mythology of control collapses when the rider becomes more valuable than the machine. And in that tension lies the beginning of a crisis that no wind tunnel or simulator can solve. The leaked contract reveals Ducati's cautious foresight, exposing protective clauses crafted specifically around the long-term risk of Marquez's battered right arm, a detail that instantly redefines the tone of negotiations. His late-season injury, forcing him to miss the final 4 races, casts a heavy shadow over both ambition and arithmetic. Ducati officials quietly admit, we have to consider durability as much as speed. The mood in the paddock shifts as uncertainty swallows the confidence once taken for granted. Marquez studies the situation and thinks, I gave everything to rise again, but now they question how long I can stay standing. A rarely discussed technical note shows that Ducati included a load variation threshold linked to stress patterns on a humerus, proving how deeply the injury shaped their planning. That clause now becomes a blade cutting both ways. Ducati hesitates because long-term guarantees feel like gambling on fragile anatomy. Marquez pushes back because his sacrifice, walking away from a fortune to rebuild his career, demands financial respect equal to his resurrection. The tension simmers in every meeting room where numbers feel heavier than gears. For Marquez, the injury is not just pain but leverage reclaimed from adversity. For Ducati, it's a reminder that brilliance can fracture without warning. The contrast forms a dangerous pulse beneath the negotiations. Engineers whisper that no simulation can predict the durability of courage. His riding style, fluid yet violent, remains a paradox they cannot engineer around. The emotional weight of doubt surfaces every time he flexes the recovering arm. Yet when he returns to the garage, his presence still fills the space like a storm preparing to break open the sky. This medical uncertainty becomes the pivotal chess piece neither side can fully control. And in that fragile balance, millions tremble like a tightening breath before truth arrives. The leaked documents expose a harsh truth haunting Ducati's corridors. The factory no longer negotiates with open hands but with a tight grip of Audi Group's shrinking margins. Audi's 11.8% sales drop in 2024, combined with declining China exports and renewed tariff pressure, has turned Ducati's racing department into a room where every euro now echoes. Executives murmur, we cannot overspend, not this cycle. The reality is brutal, because Marquez is no longer a luxury, but the cornerstone of their MotoGP identity. Financial engineers inside the company admit privately that the budget feels like thread stretched too thin. Marquez senses the tension and thinks, they want me, but fear the cost. A little-known detail shows that Audi imposed a cap on variable compensation growth for all motorsport programs, quietly tightening Ducati's ceiling. This creates a cruel paradox. The man who revived their glory may be too expensive to secure without sacrifice elsewhere. Every meeting now feels like balancing on cracked stone. Ducati cannot simply respond as Honda once did, throwing colossal sums at its superstar. Their empire depends on precision, not extravagance. The numbers are beginning to suffocate the narrative. Engineers, who live by lap times rather than ledgers, whisper frustration in the wings. The emotional weight thickens each time Marquez enters the factory office. He has become the equation that both saves and strains them. Financial pressure shapes the negotiation like gravity bending light. Ducati must choose between protecting its future or paying for the rider who defines it. The moment feels like watching a magnificent machine running at redline with shrinking fuel. And in this tension, Marquez's renewal turns from simple contract talk into a delicate struggle between ambition and survival, ending with a chilling sense that one wrong move could collapse the entire harmony they built. The looming 2027 technical reset hangs over Ducati like a shifting horizon that could either reveal new glory or erase their dominance overnight. Engineers whisper that the next-generation architecture may alter power delivery so dramatically that today's advantage could dissolve in a single preseason test. Ducati's leaders insist, we need Marquez anchoring development through 2027 to 2028. His experience is their compass in uncharted mechanical territory. Marquez listens, nods, and thinks, but I cannot lock my future to a bike no one has ridden yet. A subtle but revealing technical detail in the leak mentions prototype simulation showing differing torque curves that only elite riders can reliably interpret. That makes him even more irreplaceable. Yet it also magnifies his freedom. Ducati envisions stability as its lifeline through the regulatory storm. Marquez envisions flexibility as his insurance against repeating the Honda trap. The paddock murmurs about this silent tug-of-war, a tension felt in every corridor where future blueprints are guarded. The conflict is simple but explosive. Factory wants certainty. Rider wants leverage. He knows other manufacturers are preparing aggressive offers for the new era. Ducati knows they cannot build their next chapter around a question mark. Meetings grow heavier with each clause discussed. Some insiders describe the atmosphere as two magnets resisting and needing each other. Marquez feels the weight of choice pressing like a hand on his chest. Ducati feels time slipping like sand through tightened fingers. And somewhere between the unknown physics of tomorrow's bike and the fragile trust of today's negotiations, both sides sense that whoever bends first will define MotoGP's next decade, sealing a moment that crackles with destiny. Inside Ducati, the atmosphere now feels like a powder keg disguised as a trophy room, with Jorge Martin's sudden departure to Aprilia shaking the competitive hierarchy they once believed was unbreakable. Bagnais's visible mental strain and erratic performances have deepened internal doubts about who should truly anchor the project's evolution. Engineers debate silently in the garage, unsure whose data should steer development in the coming seasons. One technician confessed, the bike listens differently depending on who rides it. Marquez observes the turmoil and thinks, they need clarity, and I've become it. A lesser-known detail in the leak reveals Ducati tracked rider input fidelity across simulations, and Marquez scored the most consistent correlation with real-world laps. That metric alone reorients the internal compass. His status shifts from contender to cornerstone in a way no committee meeting ever officially acknowledged. The paddock feels the gravity change as loyalties and expectations rearrange themselves like metal drawn to a hidden magnet. Teammate debates evaporate when the leaked documents show Ducati's private conclusion. Retaining Marquez eclipses all other decisions. The hierarchy becomes unmistakable. Every clause now carries the weight of a franchise rather than a rider. Negotiations tighten as emotions simmer beneath corporate posture. Bagnais's uncertainty adds another quiet tremor through the structure. Martin's exit lights a warning flare about losing another star. The team's identity narrows until Marquez stands alone at its center. Ducati knows the project's stability depends on him, even if saying it aloud would fracture the room. And in this charged silence, each paragraph of the contract becomes a fuse waiting for a spark, raising the stakes of every sentence until the entire negotiation feels like a heart beating too close to the edge of revelation. The leaked revelation of a buyout-friendly window in Marquez's contract sends a chill through Ducati's upper floors, a detail so volatile it turns every negotiation into a countdown. Rival factories, especially KTM and Aprilia, sense opportunity in the regulatory reset of 2027, while even a wounded Honda sharpens its ambitions in the shadows. One executive admitted, a blank check offer is not a fantasy anymore. The fear is justified because the contract structure seems almost engineered to welcome external bids. Marquez studies the timing and thinks, if their future stumbles, I must be free. A little-known technical note attached to the clause reveals that teams analyzed his adaptability index across divergent engine concepts, proving he's uniquely suited for next-era prototypes. That makes him the most coveted asset on the grid. Ducati's posture, once commanding, now softens into defensive calculation. The paddock feels this shift instantly, like a barometer dropping before a storm. Engineers whisper scenarios where his departure would derail years of investment. The psychological pressure swells through every department. Rival factories monitor the tension with predatory patience. Ducati knows leverage has slipped from their grasp, replaced by anxiety disguised as diplomacy. Negotiators tread carefully, aware that one misjudged clause could open the door to an exodus. The situation becomes a silent duel between hope and inevitability. Marquez, meanwhile, holds the rare position of shaping not just his destiny, but the sport's competitive map. Ducati must now negotiate from fear rather than power. And in that fear lies the realization that MotoGP's balance could pivot on a single signature, turning this buyout window into the most dangerous opening in the entire contract. Gigi Dall'Igna's calm declaration that every piece has to be in its place feels less like reassurance and more like a coded warning from a man navigating the narrow edge between brilliance and collapse. Behind that composure lies the truth the leak exposes. Ducati wants to reward Marquez with a mega deal, Yet Audi's tightened financial framework refuses to stretch for sentiment. Doligna analyzes each variable with the precision of someone who has rebuilt empires from fractured ideas. He knows the rider now holds all the leverage, and the numbers confirm it. Marquez watches him closely and thinks, he understands my value, but can he afford it? A subtle technical detail buried deep in the notes references an internal performance projection model that flagged Marquez as the most development-critical rider for 2027's new regulations. That statistic alone magnifies the stakes. Ducati must balance corporate caps, injury clauses, and future uncertainty with the reality that a single exit could shatter the paddock's hierarchy. Engineers sense the tremor beneath Doligna's strategic calm. Sponsors whisper about contingency plans they hope never to use. Rival factories wait for any sign of weakness. Each meeting becomes another move in a delicate chess match where missteps echo across seasons. The contract transforms into a battlefield of patience, fear, and calculation without a raised voice in the room. Doligna carries the weight of a project that risks unraveling if he slips by a single comma. He navigates the tension like a lantern moving through fog, illuminating only what must be seen. Everyone around him understands the magnitude of the moment. Because this negotiation isn't merely a renewal, it's the fulcrum upon which MotoGP's competitive balance tilts. And in the final stillness before signatures decide the future, the entire sport seems to hold its breath, aware that nothing will ever be the same again.